Welcome back to the show. Check out these headlines. XRP supply shock, yes or no? Well, we got some more information on that front today and why I hold XRP at all. We're going to get into it and so much more. Somebody roll that beautiful intro. Right now, $3.13 trillion market cap for cryptocurrency. The market is up 2%. Now, Bitcoin here, 89,200 plus, Ethereum, $3,072 and change. Now, this is the first time they've cracked over 87,000 for Bitcoin in a minute. First time Ethereum's gotten back up on the north side of the 3,000 mark. XRP still $1.92, trying to get back to break $2. We're up 3.4 on the 24. We're up 3.9 on the 7-day. The range of price between 184 and 191. We will keep an eye on it as we move through. I want to remind you about XRP Las Vegas, ladies and gentlemen, April 30th, May 1st. At the Paris Hotel. It is absolutely opulent. This place is gorgeous. You're going to love it. We have so much in store. Premier sponsor Ripple, Paul Barron exclusive news media desk right on the floor, the exhibit floor. I tell you, we got so much. Senatorial candidate John Deaton, James Metalall, man, Murphy's going to be on stage with him. And let me tell you something. Uphold's going to be there, and we got a whole host of new names you've never seen before. So don't mess around. Get your ticket to xrplasvegas.com. Click the link right here, buy your ticket, and get a discounted room link because the rooms are really, really affordable. More affordable than they've ever been years prior. So make sure you get your link and get that done. Here we go. Looking at this, we're going to talk about supply shock here in a second. Looking at it right now, the price is 192. We see 760.56 million XRP locked up in the vaults, baby. That's where we're at. And those are the numbers, ladies and gentlemen. Now, this article comes out, and we covered an article about possible supply shock. And this article comes out, XRP reserves on centralized exchanges, known as CEX, SEXs, right? And fell sharply in 2025, dropping from roughly 4 billion tokens at the start of the year to around 1.6, 1.7 billion by December, marks the lowest level since 2018. Now, what's interesting about this is that it only uses a small sample size of exchanges. So this gets interesting. And now data from Glassnode shows exchanges falling from 3.76 billion in October to October 25 to 1.6 billion late December. However, it's not all exchanges as the way it says. That's what's interesting. Because what did I do? Well, I went to Grok. I was like, I saw some people saying discrepancies and challenging that. And I was like, okay, well, let me get into this further then. Thought we could trust Glassnode. Well, as of early January 26, the total amount of XRP held on exchanges, centralized exchanges, available supply trading vary significantly depending on data source and exchange track. So many on-chain analytics, Glassnode track only a subset of major exchanges, around 10, reporting to total XRP. Let me just try that again. Reporting total XRP reserves at approximately 1.6, 1.7 billion as late of December 2025. For those exchanges, those 10 that they cover. This represents the lowest level since 2018 and significant outflows during 2025, partly due to institutional buying via spot XRP ETFs. So you can see the benefit there. However, more comprehensive analysis covering 30 plus exchanges, including high volume platforms like Upbit, Binance, Bithumb, and Uphold, where Korean retail demands keep larger balances, estimates totals around 12 to 16 billion XRP. Well, there's a big difference in numbers now, isn't it? Top 4 exchanges alone hold about 12.3 billion XRP. One expanded data set cited approximately 14 billion across broader platforms. So there you have that. So we have a lot more out here than we realize. Now, again, I still believe that the ETFs are playing a powerful role, and that's why we know we're almost at 1 billion locked up. And it's been just a little over 30 days, and we still only have 6 spot ETFs and then an index ETF with XRP in it. So this is just getting going. So regardless if the number is 14 billion or whether it's 1.7 billion, which I think we know now it is not that, then at the very least, what I see is we still need that market infrastructure bill, because I'm a full believer in the Shane Ellis theory, or at least the idea of it working. Certainly ETFs are proving out on that point to an extent. But if we get the market infrastructure bill, the Shane Ellis theory is really, really about taking XRP off the market from traditional finance coming in and doing that by buying up the liquidity on the retail exchanges. So this is where it'll get interesting if we can get the legislation for the Clarity Act passed. This is a reminder, changing gears now in the supply shock. So we know there's more out there than 1.6, 1.7, as we had reported earlier. We're doing a larger sample size, so 12 to 14 billion is what we're talking about as a real number there. So somewhere in between 1.7 billion and 14 billion, right? That's where we're at. Nonetheless, why am I here? Certainly, I'm here to see digital assets rolled out as a new asset class. Certainly, I'm here to see XRP, ETF adoption. Certainly, I'm here for all of that. But the larger reason why I'm here has always been about the US dollar and the geopolitical landscape, which is this right here.
See in the next few years that we are going to have some kind of a grand global economic reordering.
That's why I'm here. Okay. And I know that a lot of you listening to me know that, but I'm saying it because I can see the sentiment online. I can see it on X and everywhere else. I'm getting comments. People are very frustrated. I understand that. I'm frustrated. I certainly want to see the markets move. I want to see the legislation passed and all these things. But what has kept me going through so many crypto winners and down moments, or delays, or goalposts that have been moved, timelines shifted, you know what I mean? Court case, 5 years. We didn't even see that on our bingo card, right? So why am I here? I'm here because I subscribe to the larger narrative, and I'm not asking anyone else to. I'm just sharing what gets me through the down times. And what gets me through the down times is knowing that I'm here for a much bigger reason. And yes, I want to make money too, but the reality is I want my children and children's children to have a great life. And I understand that the dollar is up against a Triffin dilemma. For those that don't know, the Triffin dilemma is when a sovereign national currency also serves in a dual role as a global reserve currency. And then there is two different things that happen. You have geopolitical shocks that happen to your sovereign dollar, because if it's being used as a world reserve currency, every time you adjust it for national reasons, it affects everyone on the global stage. Over time, that can cause a Triffin dilemma, which means you can't move one way or the other. And isn't that where we are? Of course it is. The world is losing confidence in our bond market. That's why they're giving it up, and that's why the U.S. is buying so much of it. And I believe that's exactly why the U.S. Treasury Secretary is sitting on stage saying we need to have a new global grand economic reordering. Right? And with that, what do we see? Adoptions taking place. Not fast enough for you and me, but it's real. Marshall Islands becomes the first country to distribute universal basic income on chain through USDM1, which is sovereign bonds on Stellar. Isn't that interesting? The bond market is the backbone of the monetary system. When you start to see the bond market tokenized and brought on chain, that is an absolute commitment at the highest level from governments around the world. And as a reminder, Ripple, Ondo Finance, working with BlackRock and Securitize, bringing OUSG, that's right, tokenized United States Treasury bonds to the XRP ledger. There is no higher endorsement in my mind today than seeing this right here. I'm here for the larger grand picture. It allows me to stomach the dips. It allows me not to get as frustrated as most people who just look at price and charts. Price and charts do not reflect the pipeline of business that is mounting and mounting on the backside of all of these companies that are going to provide tokenization to the new digital on-chain economy, for which has been endorsed by Marshall Islands to Stellar, by the US and the XRP ledger. You know, you're seeing this and will continue to see this at scale. But we got to get the legislation done. But this is why I'm here. I'm here because I believe there's a new monetary system that's being put into place. That's why the former governor of the Bank of England, who's been partnered with Ripple for years, is now the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney. Yeah, you know who he is. Remember when he said this with the Group of 30 document? He called XRP a global stablecoin. Now, I have been informed by communications with Ripple that that is not an accurate statement how XRP view or how Ripple views XRP. Ripple does not view XRP as a stablecoin. I reached out to them. They made it very clear. But in 2019, it's exactly what Mark Carney, the now Prime Minister of Canada, has said. That he raised a question whether a globally coordinated systemic hegemonic currency could dampen the spillover shocks associated with dominance of the US dollar as a reserve currency. A systemic hegemonic currency could, for example, be a stable coin backed by a basket of deposits at different central banks. Isn't this exactly what I said to Greg Kidd? That you could have a bunch of different deposits from reserves from different sectors of the economy, so it's impossible to crash that asset. That asset could become XRP, and XRP could at that point maybe get a designation of a global stablecoin. I don't know, but that was the term being used then. And I'm not trying to confuse anybody. Again, I've reached out to Ripple on this a year or two ago, and they said, because I was carrying this for a long time because it's so impressive to me, it's so interesting. But they said, no, we don't see that we think they got it wrong on that. Okay. So we'll see what happens over time. But nonetheless, XRP being cited by Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, but he was not at the time that he did that. But he was the former governor of the Bank of England, and then he did that. So that is quite interesting. And here is Mark Carney. Take a listen to this clip about it. It's not a transition company coming. It's a rupture.
Sustainability. The third reason why I'm going to argue we can thrive in this time is we recognize what's going on. This is not a transition, this is a rupture. This is a sharp change in a short period of time, driven by a variety of factors.
All right, now let's listen to him on this. Well, actually, before we do, remember what Russia accused the United States of doing, trying to wipe out its crypto debt of 35 plus trillion, which is more now, by tokenizing the debt and having private stablecoin issuers and then devaluing the debt and resetting the system. This makes a lot of sense.
Америка прямо сейчас пытается поменять правила на рынке золота.
U.S. is now trying to rewrite the rules of gold and cryptocurrency markets. Remember the size of their debt? It's certainly more than 35 trillion. That was last September. These two sectors, crypto and gold, are essentially alternatives to traditional global currency system. And remember, gold's gone up over 4,000. Washington's actions in this area clearly highlight one of its main goals: to urgently address declining trust in the dollar. This is where private stablecoin issuers come from. And really quickly, if you remember, what did I address in conversation with the Honorable Cristiano Carlo, represents the Digital Dollar Project, on stage at XRP Las Vegas? Are we seeing these private stablecoin issuers act like a bulkhead or a sponge to soak up these hyperinflated bonds? This is exactly what the guy from Russia is telling us right here. As in the 1930s and 1970s, the U.S. plans to solve its financial problems at the world's expense, it says. How would they do that?
Свои финансовые проблемы за счет всего мира, загоняя
It's
всех
time
туда,
by
в крипто,
this time by pushing
валютное
everyone into the
облако.
crypto cloud, it
Со
says.
временем, когда часть
Over time, once
госдолга
part of the
США
U.S.
будет
national debt is
размещена в
placed in the stable
стейблкоинах,
coins, Washington will
США
devalue
обесценит
that
этот.
debt. Now tell me something. We have been talking about this, and now Russia's saying it. This is what keeps me going. This is why I'm here, because crypto, Bitcoin, right on down the line, none of this stuff was created at my house on a whim. None of this came from some fat kid in his mom's basement who didn't like to get up and go to work early for somebody else. This is government commissioned digital asset class to relieve the shock on the US dollar as the world reserve currency. But hold on, wait for it. Because not only is that the case, but we're going to need a multipolar world, and that means we're going to need an asset that can handle that.
Need to be thinking about the structure of the underlying system. And then the third thing, which is much more speculative and longer term, but when you change when you move from one reserve currency to another, it's a multi.
What did he just say?
When you move from one reserve currency to another, it's a multipolar world. It would be better to have a multipolar system, is the bottom line. Multipolar systems are not sustainable in general in markets, but they are, the nature of payments is such that you can, for certain blocks of the economy, create a multipolar payment system. It's a topic for a whole other discussion. It's hard to get it into a sound.
Don't worry about it, Mark. We'll take it from here. You heard what he said. This is what he said.
Much more speculative and longer term, but when you change when you move from one reserve currency to another, it's a multipolar world.
It sure is, Mark. And the only one really prepared for it is Ripple, because you got to be prepared for a systemic shock to the system.
What have you. And the last key attribute of a healthy liquid market is really resilience. And that is getting at the ability for a market to recover from a significant systemic event. So if there was some sort of a market shock, the ability for order books to get back to normality and tighten back to similar prices to where they were prior to that event relatively quickly.
There you have it right there from Brianna Madigan with her time at Ripple. Now let's listen to David Schwartz.
Can be two existing world reserve currencies to simultaneously exist?
I do, and I think that could happen. I think it's quite realistic that a lot of the world is just done with the dollar as their reserve currency. I think that there's a lot of places that are willing to try something else. And one of my scenarios, and I don't think it's going to play out quickly, but like one of my wild case success scenarios for a digital asset is if countries start to realize that the US dollar is not going to be the reserve currency forever. Other things are going to be the reserve currency. And the same thing that we saw with banks, like people, when we started selling software to banks, people would say to me, why would a bank use something that like you guys were selling them when they could use something that was like made by banks? And what they didn't realize is that, only like 10 banks in the country, on the planet, are Deutsche Bank, HSBC, Credit Suisse, JP Morgan Chase, like the ones who would build a system that the entire planet would run on. For the rest of the banks, that's 6,000 smaller banks, those are their biggest, strongest competitors. Those are the entities they hate the most. They would not want to use the system built and maintained by them because it's going to be biased in favor of them, their biggest and strongest competitors. And I think the same thing could happen to nations. Like every nation would love for their currency to be the world reserve currency. That's helped the U.S., that's grown the U.S. economy, quote unquote, unfairly by leaps and bounds for decades. And every other country would be like, yeah, we'd like to have the world be the world's reserve currency. But the only countries that could possibly pull it off is the U.S. holding its position, maybe the EU, maybe Russia, maybe one or two others. But realistically, most countries know that if there's going to be a new world reserve currency that's a country's currency, it's not going to be them. And so they might actually prefer a currency that nobody can control to one that's controlled by their largest geopolitical rivals.
Especially if they pre-allocated some to the nation itself. Imagine all the nations having a position and stake in XRP. That's how you get the world, whether they're friends or not, to use an asset that no one controls, because it ain't money unless you give them some. And everybody has to agree that it's money. And the only way to get them to agree is to give them some. Not financial advice from me or anyone else. It's not just important to know what you hold. It's important to know why you're here. I'll catch all of you on the next one.